Hi, folks. Welcome to Code and Concrete, where we share the latest trends and the stories of trailblazers in the built environment. I'm your host, Matthew Schneider, the CEO of Building Inc. Joining us today is Matthieu Mercadou. Matthieu is an impact entrepreneur specializing in digital transformation and emerging technologies like decentralized ledgers, big data, and digital twins for smart cities. He founded Meridian Invest in 2003, overseeing $300 million in real estate projects. In 2017, he launched Noos Labs, leading the Miami-Dade City project and earning Miami-Dade County's keys. He later founded the Florida Blockchain Foundation to drive tech, education, and innovation. Now, Matthieu develops Magma, a platform enabling real estate owners to create digital twin tokens, ensuring trust, transparency, and efficiency. Magma is expanding across Europe, the USA, and the UAE. Matthieu, I'm excited to have you on the show. One, we share the same name, so this is some Matthieu squared power. But two, we talk about all the same things in our businesses, so this should be a great conversation.
Correct. Thank you for having me, Matt. It's a real pleasure to share this episode with you.
The first place that I'd like to start is how you got into all of this. So bring us up to speed. How did we get here?
Yes, so I have a pretty dense experience, both in finance and real estate. I started as a stockbroker in 1998 in Miami. I was 23-year-old, and I took my Series 7 on the New York Stock Exchange at 25-year-old, and was managing funds for the bank on the NASDAQ exchange. So we were discovering the internet stocks, the .com, during the .com era. So I spent during 1998 until 2001 in the bank trading NASDAQ securities. And then I moved back to Europe at the UBS. We've been bought out by Union Bank of Switzerland. And I joined the real estate department of the bank in Paris. So that's what started my journey into real estate. So we did advisory for small and medium-sized institutions. And then after 2.5 years, I left the bank to create Meridian Invest, which was the company that I ran for over 10 years. And we did redevelopment, basically buying existing properties and changing the use. So we transform offices into apartments, transform commercial spaces. In Miami, we built extended stay apartment. We bought motels that we transform into extended stay apartment. I bought a former office building, which I got the permit to do a hotel. So real estate transformation was my mission and my occupation. And then in 2017, I came across a project for the city of Miami that we created using 40 buildings that we designed in BIM. So the digital representation of them in 3D, plus all the data related to the building information. And we presented that to the city of Miami as a smart city project, as a new infrastructure with a blockchain layer. We told them that you need to have a blockchain layer to act as a notary and as a bank to transfer data sets and apply smart contracts in that built environment. So the project got awarded the keys of the county in 2018. And like you said in my bio, after that, I created the Florida Blockchain Foundation. And now I'm developing Magma, which is the brainchild of this project. And that allows any building to transform into a powerful digital asset to run the building, basically.
You were very innovative to bring in decentralized ledger. It sounds like 8 years ago when you were first putting together the idea of using and reusing BIM. What inspired that initial use or prompt of the technology? What opportunity did you see in DLT or blockchains that could empower BIM?
I think it comes from my own experience as a developer, because in Miami, I owned 3 buildings. At some point, I had 50 apartments that I was transforming. So I was going through the permit process which is very challenging and cumbersome, especially in Miami, where you have inspections for each of the items, being plumbing, electricity, and sometimes you rely on the general contractor, of course, but it can be very challenging, and especially when you lose data or when data is not shared between the different providers that work together, you can have a lot of friction, and it can be very costly. Also, when I bought the building, I bought a 1924 building, which was the former Bank of Al Capone. It was a 7-story building in the heart of downtown Miami. I did something that you're not supposed to do when you're doing real estate, is falling in love with your building. So I like the building so much that I wanted to buy it at, not at any cost, but I really wanted to buy it and transform it because it reminded me of the French architecture in downtown Miami, and it has the history of Al Capone owning it. But turned out that the building had 23 violations at the city. And it took me 1 year to close all the violations before I was able to close it. And this really drained me physically and financially because I had to hold the building and postpone the closing every time. And I realized that the data was front and center in the built environment when it comes to obtaining permits or deploying any application in the building. And so it was the time where people were talking about blockchain, and I started digging into it and understood that you could use that and connect the systems of the building and record events in an immutable manner, tamper-proof, that you could not tamper the data, and that data could be shared efficiently. And at the same time, I met my actual partner, Cooper, who is a parametric architect. He designed building in 3D in those architectural models. And so it immediately clicked that the combination of blockchain and digital twin was going to transform real estate. And for the long term, that the way we were doing business was not going to be used anymore. We were going to change radically with these digital tools. So I decided to change the way I was working and completely dedicate myself to what I'm doing right now.
As you've pointed out, real estate has a large data problem, but it comes in many forms. You've got the actual collection and holding of that data, and then you have the verification portion. Just because data is present doesn't mean that it's complete or proper or resistant to any sort of fraud. And so to me, not only do you have to encourage a data-driven culture within these property owners, but one of transparency as well, which in my mind is what blockchain offers because it's that digital fingerprint. It's some way to authenticate the data beyond just the existence of it. And that's really good in the long term when you need to go back. And so in the case of a pre-existing property, how has it been backfilling a lot of that data? Because we know that a good 80% of the real estate that will be here in the next 10 to 15 years is already built. So how can we present a good data and DLT solution for what already exists? Whereas with a BIM, of course, it's generally ground up or redevelopment.
Correct. Yes. So it's always better, like you said, to use the data aggregation process at the beginning, the design phase and the construction phase, and then you will use it during the operational phase. But when you have an existing building, if you plug Magma, for example, to it, now you have a digital file cabinet. And in this digital file cabinet, it is organized in such way that when someone does something in the building, they can either manually input data or connect to their systems directly and put the data in that digital file cabinet so that it can be shared with other parties after it has been validated. So once you enter the data, it will enter, and then you will have validator 1, 2, 3 that needs to validate that data set. So the validator can be the tenant, the property manager, the structural engineer, a third-party verificator, any of the building stakeholders. And depending on who validates, you have a scoring of that data. So now when I am looking for something in a building and I go into the Magma digital file cabinet, I see who has validated. And then it's my decision if I want to trust this data to make a contract, or if I should hire someone to verify it, which is not the goal of it. But if you believe that you should do, you can still hire someone. But the goal is to decentralize the process so the parties will validate the data so it can be shared.
And in that process, where are you storing the data? Is this on your server, their server?
Yeah. So there are many phases to it. The vision being the data being completely decentralized in a decentralized storage, like IPFS, where data is fragmented in little chunks and distributed across different nodes. And when you want to request the data, you reconstitute the data set to process it. But that's in the future. Right now, we are sort of centralized because we still use AWS. So the data is stored in our AWS server. Later, as we go, what we store right now on chain is the proof of the data. So we make a data set, and this data set, we make a hash of it on chain that's immutable and that will link to the actual data. So that's how it is organized right now. But later, we will start using IPFS, and our vision is that in 10 years from now, a lot of these data set will be decentralized for practical concern or privacy and also security.
I think that's a good point to make, that the blockchain is not storing this data. It is
Correct.
the ledger for the transaction or the change of the data. And
Yes.
it's being used
Correct.
in its proper form, because I've seen some companies emerge and they want to place data on the blockchain, and logistically that doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
There still has to be some sort of data solution that exists, and then you're
Yeah.
using the ledger as that public verifiable means of everyone
Correct.
seeing that
Yeah.
information has changed.
Exactly.
In that case, where do you see the dichotomy of privacy of data and the publicity or transparency that blockchains offer?
Mhm. It's a very good question, and it comes to a technical answer. Of course, when you are a private company, you want to keep your competitive advantage. You don't want your secrets to be open to the public, and you want to protect your data. But at the same time, you want efficiency, and you want to be able to have some sort of agility and be able to transact automatically fast. And so data needs to be open in some ways, right? So that's a dichotomy between being efficient and being private. So with blockchain comes a lot of tools. And one of these tools is called zero knowledge proof, which allows the same way when you have a document and you want to, blacken the areas that you don't want to show. And you want to show, maybe you have a bank statement and you just want to show the balance of the bank statement. So you can black everything else and just show the balance, right? So the same thing exists in cryptography, where you can only share certain data sets, but not the whole data set. So that's what we are working on right now in our architecture. We have divided a building into 5 different index layers. Each index layer corresponds to elements of the building. And inside those index layers, we also have categorization of data. So we can share certain data, but not all. That's how we tackle it.
Right. And that's a great respect to a firm's intellectual property, data privacy, but then also just generic permissions that would be appropriate if you think about some of the compliance of what information can
Yeah.
be revealed. It has to be tiered in that way. And so the solution of just having see-through properties where everything is available as if it were a public market doesn't quite make sense. And I think zero knowledge proofs are the perfect solution to this.
Yes. Yes.
So, of the information that's publicly available versus what might be more in a walled garden, in the case of Magma and a focus on facilities management, what is information that would be public that people would want to be able to see, as opposed to something that the property owner might protect with a ZK
Hmm?
proof?
Think at the beginning of safety issues require to know where are the emergency exits in a building. Require to know whether you have sprinklers or safety systems that are working. You can also want to share some of the information about the building use. Maybe you want to make people know that you have some room available for meeting rooms or for an event, or that something is happening in the building and you want the other building around to know what's happening in your building. So that's a very subtle game that we will have to put in place to share certain information and not others. Some private information might be shared only if it can result in a contract. You might want to share that you have a co-working space available only if it will allow you to rent this space faster. Um, so there will be an infrastructure that we propose to the building owners, and then they will pick and choose which they want to make public or keep private, basically.
Yeah, the safety piece is big, and I could see how municipalities would be interested in that. I know that you have a great relationship with the city of Miami, and maybe you have some digital twins. What does the city think of this improved facilities management? Because I would think that those who oversee that, safety permits and licenses, would be in love with the idea.
Yeah. I think most of the smart city project right now have to do with urban planning, climate response, or disaster management, mainly safety issues for the public. So in that case, having a digital twin where citizen and company can share data, uh, I mean, is pretty needed and obvious for a city. So the city of Miami is developing several initiatives for climate response and to link the public assets, being the streets and the building environment, public building environment, linking it to the citizens so they can report events and share what's happening in the real world in a digital platform. They also are building something for monitoring the construction sites and to make available what buildings are being built, how many units are available, when they are available. So this is also another aspect of the digital twins that city would be using is for urban planning, zoning, and permitting. And we, as Magma, bring the inside information of the buildings, the one that the building owners are willing to share, and also willing to connect their building to the public APIs. Because by connecting such environment, you connect to the mobility information of the city. You know, where can I find a bus or a self-driving car or delivery systems or any other mobility service. So by creating this digital world where public and private and also academia can connect, I think cities find a lot of interest, but also private and academia find a lot of interest in this new infrastructure.
Yeah, the hyper connectivity that smart cities offer, I think, has a lot of promising potential. It's
Mm-hmm.
lagged quite a bit in the US if I were to compare it to some initiatives in Europe or Asia
Mm-hmm.
or even
True.
the UAE, which I know you have a presence in
Yes.
both. We can talk about some of the opportunities for interconnected buildings and uh, decentralized physical infrastructure network, and RWA certainly will play a big role in AI
Yeah.
agents. If we talk about the commoditization of energy and trading between facilities. But I want to talk about the climate component. So, what insights would uh, a BIM on Magma offer about locally, and then climate at large? And how is the experience talking about that differed in the US compared to Europe or the UAE?
So basically, we can provide information about the energy consumption of a building. We connect sensors in the building that will monitor the flow of people in a room and the temperature of the room and the temperature outside the building. With this information, we can adapt the temperature of the room depending on how many people are using it. Most of the buildings right now are very inefficient when it comes to energy use because they keep on producing the same amount of energy regardless of the use of the building and the zone of the building. So one entire floor would be cooled or heated at the same way, whether you have one people or 100 people in it. And that with sensors and the Magma system, you can monitor and adapt this so that you can make savings on your energy bill that will cover the cost of installing our system. So that also can apply to entire districts, and for the city that less also CO2 emission and also consuming less energy is beneficial for, because who likes to pay high energy bills, right? So it's beneficial for the environment and it's beneficial for the building and the city. And the last question was about the difference.
Yes, so comparing those conversations around environments and climate in the US
yeah, depending on
to Europe or UAE.
Yeah, I would say, of course, Europe, as we know, is very focused on energy savings, and because they are relying a lot on Russia for their energy, and so it's a critical topic. And also carbon emission have been very with the Paris Accord, have been front and center of discussion. So you have a lot of regulation that force companies to lower carbon emission, force companies to equip their building with sensors and monitoring systems and reports. It's mandatory, so they have no choice but doing it. In the US, it's starting in New York. In Miami, we have the B305 initiative that over 20,000 square feet, a building needs to be equipped with sensors and start monitoring, like I say, by zone, to be able to lower the energy consumption. But it's not as a strong regulatory framework than in Europe. So I would say the concern are a little bit less. And also the public is less concerned in US than in Europe. And in UAE, it's quite also strong, the regulation to lower the energy consumption, lower the CO2 emission. So the framework is there as well. But I think overall, all these countries understand that the use of this new type of technology will be beneficial for the long run in terms of sustainability, because it allows to track the material, track the safety, track the recyclability, lower the energy consumption, all these benefits that using this new infrastructure will come in the long run. Plus, in terms of economic development, it allows to create new skill jobs, attract capital, attract investment. So overall, I think they all agree that this is the next generation.
Absolutely. I have another twofold question for you. So how do you see this infrastructure supporting the circular economy? And do you see this interacting with the carbon credit markets?
Yeah, so having for me, the digital twin is just the evolution of the drawing. Any idea comes in writing or with a drawing. And then the next iteration is doing a digital twin. And the advantage of the digital twin is that unlike the drawing, it can stay stored somewhere and you can always find it. Imagine if Leonardo da Vinci had digital twins stored on blockchain of all his invention, we could still, improve them and work on them today. Whereas if they are in a paper format, it's very difficult. So I think that having a digital twin for buildings is what we will leave during the life cycle of the building from one buyer to the next buyer and for the future generation, right? So having this information stored improve the recyclability of the building because you know exactly what the building is made of. And when someone buys this digital twin, it's going to find this information and maybe it's going to use it to recycle, resell, or put to the waste, but in a better fashion, the elements of the building. For repairs, it will allow predictive maintenance. So all that plays into this circular economy and sustainability uh, aspect for the built environment.
I agree. That was one of my leading questions, and it's something that we look at a lot. The golden thread idea, where this information is present from dirt to disposition. And
Yes.
at the potential disposition, the reuse of materials or components from the
Yeah.
property. And given that we live with a finite amount of land, and in some cities, this is very pressing. If you look at Hong Kong, they don't have too much land to expand into. And so if they want to support a growing population, they have to redevelop. And a lot of their properties don't have that pre-existing information, and you are not able to reuse those resources, which is very
Mm-hmm.
wasteful. I believe it was
Yeah.
Jo Bronkers from FIBRE, the Foundation for
Yeah.
International Blockchain and Real Estate Expertise, who has been talking about digital logbooks and circular economy, suggested that housing prices could be reduced substantially, 20 to 30%, with the proper reuse of materials if you
Mm-hmm.
have some sort of golden thread
Mm-hmm.
in place.
Yes. No, that's I agree with that. Uh, that can solve a lot of issues. Also, there was a case that is striking during the crisis in 2008 when all the construction stopped, whether it's in the US or in Dubai. When the market came back, a lot of these properties were up for sale. The problem was they had no record of the construction models. So they could not use the existing build, even though it was raised and foundations and some of the building were already raised. They had to demolish all the building just because they didn't have the record of the construction. So just that,
Wow.
I think it's a striking example of how these digital twins could be very helpful for the industry.
And that could be an issue that we see again. There's a number of
Yeah.
construction projects underway, but there's been a black swan event, which is the introduction of very high tariffs. And the trade war is just beginning. And I know that's going to negatively impact a lot of construction projects,
Yes.
likely causing them to stall out
Yes.
because they're underwater at that point and they can't finish, and they're not going to get the financing to finish. And so you'll have
Yes.
these half constructed assets.
Yes.
And in the US, the odds that they are using BIM is actually quite scarce unless it's a highly complex asset,
Yeah. Yeah.
a proper development. So just actually a spur of the moment question that I want to ask is the implementation and the adoption of BIM in the first place. I do know that this is more pertinent in Europe and that it's starting to make its way into the US. How do
Mm-hmm.
we demonstrate to developers that this is a technology and a process worth
Yeah.
investing time and money into?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And for those buildings that are going to experience such trouble, I would advise them that maybe we can work on that, that even we can, build something with Magma and building where we can propose a solution that they plug instantly and they start recording the data in our systems. And so they can sort of own these data for a moment. At least they don't lose everything, but they are able to document enough for the next buyer to create some value. And this value, I think that will be also a very interesting for them to create value by just inputting data, which they have the data. They just have to have their stakeholders and service providers to build the models. Um, and to your question, how we demonstrate, I think it's through education. I think it's working with universities, like we are doing in Miami with Miami-Dade College, FIU, and University of Miami. I was speaking at UM last week. We are working on creating a curriculum for the School of Engineering and the School of Architecture. We have to build the skill gap that exists right now, because we need professional to handle that in the real estate company. Every real estate company should have a data specialist, just responsible to store and organize the data so it can be used. Contractual data, financial data, technical data. So all this needs to be organized. And so we need to work with universities, create the curriculum, and place these guys in those companies so they can start working on it.
That's a good point. There's a big workforce development opportunity in all of this, better equipping the next generation to understand data, artificial intelligence, best building practices. I know that, UW-Madison in Wisconsin, where I grew up, they have a commercial real estate course, but they'll just tell you how to go out and buy the properties and how to make the most money off of that. And this is an industry that's becoming more complex than people realize rapidly. And folks are on the ropes when they think that they can just go out and raise money and acquire something, not realizing all the nuance and specialization required. And just using ChatGPT is not your remedy. People say, well, I can upload a PDF to ChatGPT and it's going to help me solve my problems. But that's a very flawed system, and we could go into a grocery list of why. But the focus on data and actually creating the data-driven mindset and culture within a firm it's a prerequisite to the actual artificial intelligence tools that anyone wants to leverage.
Yeah, I agree. And to that, I will add that talking about culture, we need to start a culture of data-driven culture. We need to think data rather than just profit, because profit derives from data anyway. Data is just a way to package information to make contracts. And any economic system is made of contracts, exchange of value between companies and people. And how our contracts are made is because you know the identity of one person, and on the other end, the identity of the other person, and you know the value exchanged, and you know it through data. So we need to get to this culture of having data sets and keeping them up to date and being rewarded for it. Validating data must be a thing in the economy. Minting should be a new word that we all use in our everyday life. How did you mint information in the blockchain? What did you mint? What value did you create by doing such? And so that should be rewarded, and that should be our focus now, is how we create value and reward people, companies, to validate those data sets to create value.
Absolutely. I think there's three ways to look at data as an asset as opposed to an afterthought or something that could even be a liability. Oh, I didn't think of this. Now I'm going to be facing a penalty, that darn data. No, you should be excited about data, because the three monetization routes here are, first and foremost, better data compels a better valuation for the asset.
Exactly.
So that's number one. Second is the potential monetization of data. As we step into a more decentralized economy and data is actually protected, and we want to attribute that if it's being used in an AI model or as intellectual property for someone else's design process, holding on to that turns into money that can trickle back to the property or the stakeholders. And if you think about decentralized physical infrastructure networks, if you're equipping these IoT devices and someone is using that data, they want to consume that becomes passive income. The example of Wi-Fi routers being turned into cellular networks is a really good example. And then the financial incentive that you're talking about, and I like that you take this approach, because I've seen some business models where they will actually penalize people for uploading data and they make that a business model. One, you have to pay for the data. Two, you have to pay to update the data. But
Yeah.
with the use of a token, small incentives for doing your
Yeah.
role is, I think it's very intelligent, but it promotes the longevity that we're looking for.
Yes, absolutely. And if you want to, for me, data is a commodity. It's everywhere. It has no form. It can be everything and everywhere at the same time. It only becomes an asset when we organize it, when we
Yes.
package it, so it can be processed, computed. I think we are getting to this era where data becomes an asset class, pretty much like a service plus the data about the service. So you do something, but how are you providing the proof of what you have done? How can you prove it in a way that someone can use that to make a contract? And that has value. And which we should value that. And I know that some governments are working on the legislation to promote data as an asset class per se.
So now, data, you capture it, you clean it, you structure it, and that's how you start to separate the signal from the noise. Because just having data, the question is, what do you want to do with it? And this is where we start to introduce AI, and it can have very specific tasks of what we want to do with that data. What are some opportunities for artificial intelligence to be introduced to a real estate development firm's operations, either in pre-construction, construction, or throughout like facilities management operations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's during the whole life cycle of the building, you can think of optimization through AI. And I think in the future, we will all have different AI agents helping us for different use, whether it's for our personal use, an AI agent will tell you what's best to do depending on your agenda, where to go, depending on the Matthieu, things like this. But in a building environment, AI agents will be used in different verticals so that we can have what we call cognitive buildings. Because if we use our infrastructure or buildings Inc. infrastructure, you package data so you can perform operation in the building operational management. So think of predictive maintenance. If you have sensors that monitor vibration on a pipe, and then suddenly you hear like a very violent vibration, you can prevent a leak or a broken pipe or downtime. Or if you have sensor for temperature and something is heating too much, and you can start applying AI agents for predictive maintenance, to avoid downtime. You can also add AI agents for energy performance, for compliance and certification. I have a LEED building or a BREEAM certified building, and all now my data sets are digitized. So now I just add one or the other. And when I miss one, my agent will tell me, hey, this is what you need to do. If you want to get your certification, you have to update this and this and this. ESG monitoring, leasing agent, help me lease a building in that district. Where should I go? Where should I lease? So I think you will have a lot of AI agents. The question is now to organize the data and also being able to reward the data, because now all the AI are running on scratching data from different sites, and there is no notion of ownership of the data and intellectual property. So what we need to do with our models of Web3 is protect the intellectual property and the ownership, and use AI so that when the AI is going to query some data, it's going to trigger a payment, a micro payment to the system, so it can deliver the data and the AI can make the recommendation.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I was talking about that on an X space where we can use AI agents, and I'm sure they'll be very helpful, but you want to be very careful about how your data is collected and used by that AI agent. And to grant an alternative perspective, if you are using an AI agent for your firm's operations and you are streamlining or automating something, you want to know that that agent has been trained on good data. And this is going to be
Hmm.
a more pressing issue. If we go back to just the principles of what we're doing here, we're verifying data before it goes onto a blockchain or into the system, and then
Hmm.
before that gets contributed to some sort of artificial intelligence model. And I think that should instill a lot of trust into people,
Yeah.
knowing that if I'm going to use something for best design practices or knowing how to operate my building so that I can manage a whole portfolio instead of one, you want to know
Yeah.
that the AI agent isn't going to formulate some completely incoherent or hallucinate a solution to my property
Mhm.
management that is actually detrimental. So I think
Yeah.
people are still going to play a massive role, but just folks have to understand the relationship and the accountability of data and AI agents before they use them.
It's critical. Yeah. Absolutely.
When we look at AI agents and some of the smart city stuff and the almost personality that could be embodied within buildings, Paul Doherty talks about this, where buildings are going to have so much competent information held within them and AI agents that they can almost operate as if they were people, right? We're sort of personifying buildings in this.
Yes.
Do you know of any prominent use cases where this is trying to be rolled out, or if not, how close on the horizon are we to a practical example of this?
No, I think we are quite far from it. The digital twin market overall, I think it's set to be, I think it's in the tens of billions right now, and it's set to be 180 billion by 2030, which is a huge growth. But in order to have cognitive buildings, I think you need to have smart buildings first. That means connected buildings. And so the market of digital twins and blockchain um, connected buildings need to grow before we can have cognitive cities and systems interacting with one another in districts. And that's also the goal of our initiatives in Miami and Dubai. We are building in Miami what we call the Miami-verse, which is a project that is vetted by Miami-Dade County. Since we received the keys of the county in 2018, we've been working on that. And what we want is to have a digital replica of downtown Miami, designating downtown as an innovation district for smart buildings and digital twins. So the data that we collect can be shared and that we can link the different initiatives from the city, like the DDA digital twin or like the City of Miami digital twin, and plug in any new digital twin in that environment so that they can start communicating, and we can start also share best practices, connecting residential building, a commercial building, logistic building. They're not the same data sets. They're not the same use, they're not the same tenants. So using this information, we can deploy more and grow geographically. And we are doing the same in Dubai. So we can share also best practices. And the vision is to have like an infrastructure where Dubai and Miami can be connected with the same environment. So they can direct investment, cross borders, share best practices, facilitate the leasing of properties between one and the other, and so on.
When I said personified buildings, cognitive was the word I was looking for. I think that's a great description of what you have here. When we
Yeah.
look at international opportunities, standardization is going to be very important. And I talk about this in tokenization because you have
Hmm.
smart contracts, you have the capital stack and the investment portion of it, but then there's the underlying assets. And
Yes.
many people think if you tokenize one piece of real estate, it's must be somewhat similar to another piece of real estate, but this couldn't be further
Mm.
from the truth if you don't have
Yeah.
any sort of standardization in the building practices, the
Correct.
operations, and then the facilitation of the data pertaining to all of that.
Yeah.
How do you see
Mm.
standardization of building practices and data management? Uh, how are you supporting that, and how do you think it'll
Yeah.
evolve?
Yeah. I think it comes down to the ontology, meaning the namings of the items in a building. How do you name a room? How do you name a door? How do you name the floor? If you have the different naming from one country or even one city to the other, one system to the other, and it's not interoperable. You cannot link two properties together. So the way to tackle that is to create a common ontology for the real estate industry, the same way the aviation industry did for planes and airports all over the world. They all speak the same language. The baggages are named the same, the plane parts are named the same everywhere in the world. So I think we have to come up to a system where Europe, UAE, and US use the same ontology for buildings. And I think one that is coming up for me is the IFC International Standard for construction. That's the one we are using. We also use the Revit standard, which is one of the most the main standard, or we convert it to Revit or IFC if it's not. But I think it comes down to the industry coming together to specify this and decide of a standard of naming for this. And I think for the BIM industry, it should be the IFC.
Yeah, great point. We reference the IFC a lot as well. And I think this sort of standardization will build trust and confidence in people who want to participate in the borderless economy that blockchain is suggesting, or at least offering. Because when I invest in the UAE, I don't know what building practices they have. I don't know how
Yeah.
people are managing that property, and I don't.
Yeah.
There's just all sorts of additional risk that could be introduced just because I lack familiarity in that, and having a consistent expectation across assets as you financialize them, I think that's really going to open up the economy a lot. And so just from like a capital flow perspective, adopting BIM best practices, a data room, looking at the IFC, and then just saying, where do I meet the gold standard of real estate? And this is something that we talk about at Building too, where if we set high expectations across all properties, you are establishing something of a gold standard for real estate so that no matter what country you're looking at, you have confidence in that asset, its capital stack, and a smart contract associated with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there you can have fractional ownership where you can divide a property into tiny investment parts, and maybe you can swap one building for another building because they have the same characteristic and the same level of safety and the safe yield. And so you're not exchanging, you don't have to sell your a piece of property and convert it into dollars or euro. Now you can directly swap one piece of land or property in UAE for one in the US.
Right. And you're diversifying in doing that. But also from an institutional perspective, as they consider risk and capital becomes more expensive, only the best projects are going to be financed. And these questions about how something is being constructed and maintained are going to come into light. And so I think for those who want to attract capital for their projects, a good data management solution is very important.
Yes. And we believe that DeFi, decentralized finance, would be critical to this environment in a way that people that own crypto are going to be able to stack those crypto in liquidity pools that are going to finance green retrofits or building construction. Because the way it's built, it can only be released if you can prove how you use the funds. So it's much more transparent and will bring a lot of trust to the sector. And I think a lot of people who own crypto, which the crypto market is poised to grow exponentially during the next years, if that pool of money can fund retrofits and real estate operation, I think the real estate market is going to only grow exponentially as the crypto market.
We agree.
Yeah.
So looking at Magma, what are some milestones of 2025 so far, and what can we expect for the rest of the year?
So first, we are very happy to have been vetted again by Miami-Dade County. We did an event last February that we called the Digital Real Estate Summit, where we gathered all the public, private, and academia stakeholders in the real estate sector, and we showed them the convergence between digital twins, digital assets, and AI. And so during that summit, the county reiterated their support for the project. We are onboarding real estate developers and companies right now in the US. And so we want to do the same in Dubai. We want to host the same event in Dubai. And now we are going with the Miami Chamber of Miami-Dubai Chamber, sorry, in Dubai next week to meet some of the largest real estate developers. And so we will be talking about cross-border investment and duplicating the effort that we are doing in Miami in Dubai. So that would be our focus for 2025 is linking the two initiatives, being able to put around the table all the stakeholders that are going to participate, the service providers and the building owners. And 2026 and on would be to build those two environments.
Mm-hmm. Very exciting international expansion. If
Yes.
folks want to get involved, who should and what would that collaboration look like?
They can contact me at Matthieu at thisismagma.com. And I think you shared our links as well.
Yes.
X
Yep.
and the other links. They can follow us and contact us. So could be any company related to real estate, because any company that has a service to provide to real estate is collecting data and providing data to buildings and can contribute and be rewarded for the data they provide. We have a mechanism in Magma where we, as Magma, share a part of our profit to the contributors. So that's already a given that they will get their contribution rewarded by Magma. And then we expect the owners and the other service provider to also contribute when they need data to be able to share this into the pool for the stakeholders. It could be building owners. Any building owner should be interested in what's happening right now, whether it's for the ownership of the building or for the operational management. So, and also partners like you, Matt, happy to share our work and see how we can collaborate and bring value to what you are doing and vice versa. I think the opportunity is immense. And I mean, the more we collaborate, the more we win.
Absolutely. It's a great time to be building something big. This convergence of technologies has created a lot of blue ocean markets. And we already know that real estate is, many trillions of dollars and quite global. So there's many places where different builders and partners, companies, investors can rise up, and they often say that a rising tide raises all ships. And we're seeing that in blockchain currently
100%.
Between the adoption and just the new technologies that are coming out. You and I and our platforms are really being elevated. I think this has been an awesome, prosperous conversation, talking about some of my favorite things and diving into the considerations for data, digital twins, blockchain, and a little bit of tokenization as well, and AI agents too. This is really bleeding edge stuff. And, Matthieu, I applaud you for the work that you're doing. It's similar in some ways to us and different in its own congratulatory ways. And I think that just demonstrates the diversity of opportunity in data. Like you said, it's everywhere. It's very multifaceted. The question comes down to how do you use it at the end of the day?
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I think it's exhilarating and very exciting. And I look forward for collaboration.
100%. And for all of our listeners, I'll have Matthieu's links in the show notes. And if you enjoyed the conversation, please consider a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to listen. Until next time, then. Thank you again, Matthieu.
And you get 2 Matthieu for the price of 1 today. All right. Thanks.